Hello, and welcome to Reach's podcast on the prevention of targeted violence, a safe space where we explore the ways of making a positive impact on our communities by preventing targeted violence. I'm Andy Martinez, your host on this journey. In the United States, Hispanics are often disproportionately targeted for violence, highlighting the urgent need to raise public awareness and understanding about this community in order to safeguard the well-being of this community. Joining us today is Dr. Max Orezzoli-Garcia. Dr. Orezzoli-Garcia is a sociology professor at the Florida Memorial University in Miami, Florida. Good afternoon, Dr. Orezzoli-Garcia. We're excited to have you here with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your areas of specialty?
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon. So my background and research focus lie in community healthcare disparities. So I'm involved in both the academic and the community side when it comes to studying societal changes in health or access to healthcare or health disparities. I've been a full-time professor, associate professor at Florida Memorial University for approximately 22 years, and I work in the community.
Are you considered Hispanic? And can you tell us how Hispanic is defined?
Yes, I am considered Hispanic. I was actually born in South America, in Peru. I am also part Cuban, so I'm a Cuban Peruvian. So Hispanic is defined by nationality, ethnicity, and cultural histories. So to give an example, there are many people in Miami where I live now that have Hispanic backgrounds that do not speak Spanish, but they're still considered Hispanic. What's interesting now is Hispanic and Latinos are being used interchangeably now in the United States. And I don't know if you understand, but Latinos are people who are, it's a broad sense of the word, of which they include Brazilians. They include also Haitians, anyone who speaks of a Latin origin language. Hispanics are only those that speak Spanish coming from the island of Hispaniola, which is present-day Haiti and Dominican Republic. So Hispanic is, like I said, it's a cultural phenomenon, and you don't have to particularly speak Spanish to be considered Hispanic in the United States.
Would you be able to educate us about the uniqueness of the Hispanic community that you're surrounded by?
Yeah, so here in Miami, this is a very multi-ethnic Hispanic community. Let me move forward and say, I'll use the word Latino because there's a lot of non-Hispanic that fit in that category in Miami, like I said, like Brazilians, which are growing in numbers. But here in Miami, we have an array of different Latin American individuals, many from Central America, Honduras, Mexico. We have a lot of them from South America, like myself, Peru, Argentina, Brazil. We have a lot of from the Caribbean, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. So in Miami, in essence, it's a very multi-Hispanic, Latino ethnic community because there's so many from those different nationalities here in this area.
That's really fascinating. What are some common misconceptions that society has about the Hispanic community?
Well, I think the biggest one would be that we're all in the same pot, meaning that we're all defined as one ethnic group, as one category. I personally have been asked if I speak Mexican because, as you know, I think a lot of people misunderstand that there's so much diversity. And by the way, Mexican is not a language, and it's trying to explain this to people who don't understand the diversity in Hispanics is interesting. But misconception would be exactly that everybody puts us in the same category and not understanding that even within our own Hispanic heritage, there's so many diverse aspects of us, different foods, different ways that we pronounce, just different types of Spanish that we all speak down in Miami, depending on where you're from. Different sense of humor, different jokes, different foods. Some like it spicy, some don't eat spicy food. It's an amalgamation of different backgrounds mixed amongst us Hispanics, and people really not quite understand that in the United States, I believe.
This brings me into the next question. Are there specific cultural or historical factors that contribute to the stigma faced by the Hispanic community?
Yeah, I think this probably comes from the history of many Hispanic Latino immigrant groups coming to the United States, how they have actually been made into, I'll give an example. Cubans in Miami, let's speak about Cubans since I'm part Cuban, coming to the United States. At one point, when Castro released during Mariel back in 1980, when he released a lot of the criminals that were shipped over to Miami in the boats in Mariel, one of the misconceptions were a lot of prisoners are going to be released. Therefore, all Hispanics they have to be criminals. So there was a stigma here in Miami where a lot of the new incoming Cubans and then other minority Hispanic groups were seen as being criminals. You got to be careful. Same thing with Puerto Ricans. They're in gangs. So some of the stigma is we're in gangs, we're criminals, we're always creating problems. And that's an example of one of the things that we've been stigmatized in the United States.
So from your perception, in what ways does systematic racism contribute to the stigma and discrimination against the Hispanic community?
Well, this systemic racism actually has its effect on the education, the employment opportunities, healthcare, for example, and within Hispanic and Latino communities. I believe that being of Hispanic Latino background puts you at a bit disadvantage in employment in the United States when it comes to opportunities. It could affect your educational, trying to get into schools or trying to get into a specific program that are non-Hispanic oriented areas. For example, there is a lack of Hispanics in certain sectors in the industry. Computer science, for example, would be one of them. There isn't enough representation in healthcare also, medical doctors and professors of sorts. So, and that could be a systemic issue within racism, just stopping anyone who they may consider Hispanic, Latino, and not allow them to have these opportunities.
How has the media influenced the perception and perpetuation of stereotypes that lead to stigma against Hispanic individuals?
Well, Miami is well known for telenovelas, which are the soap operas of Latinos and Hispanics. So the media has really portrayed Hispanics in a way that we are either very sexualized for women. That's what we see in the telenovelas, kind of sexualized, hyper-sexualized. Or we're the other extreme, which is where the people who are cleaning the houses or the servants or the people who cut the grass. So there's an extreme bias from being hypersexualized to being the help. And when it comes to really telling the story through the media on what the family unit, the Latino Hispanic family unit is, that is lost in translation. So that's an unfortunate thing. And I think the media has done a terrible job in actually really portraying us in the way that we should be portrayed. And they do it in a very stereotypical manner, unfortunately.
This seems very concerning. And what is the impact of these stigmas and stereotypes against individuals of Hispanic origin that you know of?
Well, like I said, I think the portrayal of Latinos and Hispanics in the United States by the media creates more of a discriminatory process. Now, in areas, let me try to see if this makes sense. In cities like Miami, New York, El Paso, Los Angeles, where there's a large group of Hispanics, it's different when these Hispanic groups or Latino groups start moving out into other non-Hispanic dominated areas. That's when we see a lot of discrimination because of that neglect, that bias. And that's when the media can actually create more of stigma. When these groups move to other areas, there's a net migration into non-Hispanic areas where we can see more discrimination in regards to, okay, well, if you're Hispanic, maybe you need to get a job as someone who cleans the house, or maybe these are expectations that we have for these people, or so on and so forth. So that can be problematic. And as we can see in the United States, there's a lot of migration moving from areas of more Hispanic dominated places to less Hispanic because of demographic changes. And we can see this growing. As you can see, a lot of people that are not aware of Hispanics are being influenced by the media.
And what's your take on policies? What policies or changes do you believe could help address systematic stigma and discrimination against Hispanic individuals?
Well, what's interesting is October is Hispanic Heritage Month. And I think certain universities, certain cities do a good job. Others do not. I don't know if it's recognized throughout the United States. I think it's a time to create an awareness. How that leads to policies is maybe educating the public, educating your political system on what it means to be a Hispanic in the United States, having access to resources, having a barrier because you don't speak a language, English that is, trying to understand the process as an example, applying for a Visa card, trying to get, credit from a bank. How can we incorporate policies that are going to make it a bit easier for people to get into the workforce and hence not be discriminated, not be stigmatized? That is a very interesting question. I guess it all starts from the voters, electing people who can actually have a voice and make local changes and hopefully regional, district, maybe statewide changes where policy can be incorporated that would actually not allow people to discriminate based on being Hispanic.
Thank you for sharing this with us. And before we conclude, what can we do as private citizens to fight inequalities and biases towards Hispanic communities?
One of the things I think we can do is there should be more dialogue, more advocacy in the community. Doing this podcast is a good example of what we need to do. Trying to really emphasize that Hispanics in the media are not what Hispanics really are in the United States. Like I said, creating more awareness through maybe events or through the universities, having more cultural groups really represent the Hispanic background in a way that's going to be less biased. It's through private citizenship, through participation in community dialogue that we can actually reach through maybe a group, a root-grass kind of way that would overtake the bias that we see in the media. So I'm hoping that is one of the ways we can combat inequalities, biasness in the United States.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Orezzoli-Garcia. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day. Appreciate it.